So they board the submarine with handguns and nothing else.
Yeah.
Buck naked.
Yep. The Germans were in for quite a shock.
They brought him below deck to the Atherton sickbay. This is a picture of the operation. And what makes this story even crazier, they did the surgery without any general anesthesia. He was awake.
Whoa.
So, of course he passes out.
Unfortunately, that B-17 bomber crashed in Greenland. All the crew members survived. However, the radio was damaged. He spent nearly a week, frozen fingers and all, to rebuild the broken radio. He was able to send out a signal. That signal made it to the U.S. Coast Guard cutter, the Northland.
The Court of Inquiry found that if McCain didn't delay that 20 minutes, that test group...
All right. He ran out of time. What do you guys think? Do we let him
I
keep
say
talking?
let's let him finish.
Should I? Okay, I'm going to turn his mic back on. All right, go ahead.
All right, thank you guys. So they have a Court of Inquiry.
The episode that we're doing on New Year's Eve, to commemorate the Cass and Young.
Right.
By then, we'll already have a few drinks. And then Shane pulls up his garbage can. It's like, all right, yeah, we got pulling out of the garbage can. And he goes, hey, I donated that. All right, we are live. Okay, so here are the rules, and I'm going to get the timer. Each person has 4 minutes and 59 seconds to tell a story that we don't know, or most likely don't know. And Connor drew the short straw. So Connor, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am ready.
And if you run out of time, if you don't get your story told within 4 minutes and 59 seconds, I will be shutting off your mic, and then we'll vote to decide whether or not we let you keep talking. And viewers, how do those rules sound to you? I see Frank's on there, Charlton and Russ. All right, you ready?
Ready.
All right, timer begins now.
All right. Well, my story is about the HMCS Oakville, which was a Flower-class corvette. And the reason I'm talking about her tonight is she was built in the same yard as the Alexander Henry, the ship that I'm with. So the story I'm telling tonight is her encounter with U-94, a German U-boat, which was on patrol in August of 1942 in the Caribbean. Her mission was to sink oilers that were making their way towards Canada. As part of a convoy, she targeted a fleet that just so happened to have the Oakville. During the attack, a PBY would actually disable the ventral planes, I think that's the term, of the U-boat, forcing her to surface. And Oakville would proceed to engage in a surface action and would attempt to ram the U-boat. Her first attempt was a glancing blow. Her second attack was a glancing blow. During this time, they're so close together, the crew is chucking Coca-Cola bottles at the decks of the U-94. What ultimately ended up happening, though, was her third ram was successful. But because the Flower goes up and over it, she cuts off her own sonar dish, or ASDEC, and as a result, she starts flooding and loses power. The Oakville's captain orders 14 men on the deck. They're going to do a boarding action of U-94. However, unfortunately, as they gather on the forecastle, the 4-inch gun on the Flower-class corvette fires, and the concussion of the blast actually knocks them all out. 2 men manage to regain consciousness before both powerless ships drift away from each other. These 2 men, who are wearing nothing but their shorts, a gas mask, and a gun belt, are sent over the side to board the U-94. By the time they make it to U-94, both of them had lost their shorts. So it was quite a sight for the Germans, who come up on deck and see these 2 Canadians coming aboard with nothing but gas masks and pistols drawn. And supposedly the first 2 Germans jumped overboard upon seeing that sight. Ultimately, what ended up happening was one of the sailors held the crew at gunpoint on the stern of the sub while the other guy went in and searched. And unfortunately, the Germans had done a very good job at destroying their gear, all their code books. So he ultimately got nothing out of it. But they all get off the ship. And what ends up happening is most of them end up being retrieved by the USS Lee, which was an American 4-stacker, a Wilkes class. And ultimately, they determined the Canadians from the Germans by basically how many English swear words the Canadians know. And then they're allowed to return to Oakville. But that picture right there is kind of funny because it would actually end up being basically promoted, and I just find it funny how they kind of left out the part where they had lost their shorts on the way over. That's my little story, and it's, of course, I'm telling it quickly, but the reason why I decided to tell this tonight is because that ship, the Oakville, was built in the same yard that my ship was built almost 20 years later.
Well done, man. You got that story told in 4 minutes.
So for the pictures, what are we looking? Are we looking at the actual?
Yeah.
Yes, but the ones with the submarine, is that the submarine?
That's U-94.
So did it actually sink, or did they capture it?
Yes, U-94 would ultimately sink. She was damaged. She had been hit by a PBY as well as depth charges. She was actually hit by depth charges while on the surface, and supposedly the blast broke her keel from below as well. So, yeah, they beat the heck out of her, and they also put a 4-inch explosive shell right through her mast as well. So, yeah, Oakville wasn't taking any trophies that night.
So wait a second. So the two guys that made it onto the German submarine, it was just two guys, right?
Yeah, they assembled 14 guys. The gun knocks out all of them, but 2 of them managed to wake up and get over the side before they drifted apart. The 2 guys were Sub-Lieutenant Hall Lawrence and Petty Officer A.J. Powell. Those were the 2 guys who got aboard.
And they're basically, before they jump in the water, whatever, they're just wearing their boxer shorts, right?
Yes, because this is Canadians in the tropics.
Okay, yeah, because it's just east of Cuba, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they were just east of Cuba.
How in the hell did they lose their boxer shorts?
Their official statement is that the currents that night apparently knocked them off. And one guy says his snapped off him as he hit the water. But
so they board the submarine with handguns and nothing else.
Their gun belts and their gas masks. That's it.
Buck naked.
Yep. Like I said, the Germans were in for quite a shock.
What time did this all go down?
This happened in August of 1942.
Do you know what time of day?
It was at night. And just as an aside, Oakville would survive the war. She'd be decommissioned in 1945 as she was considered surplus to what was expected to come next. But she was sold to Venezuela in 1946, and she would serve until at least 1961 that I can tell.
All right. That was a good starter story to our quick history night tonight. So for those of you that aren't aware, my name is Ken Stano with the YouTube channel History X, and this is the Museum Ship Mafia video podcast. Tonight, I've got 3 guys joining us: Shane Stevenson from the Buffalo Naval Park, John Epp from the USS Slater in Albany, New York, and then Connor, who just gave that great story about the it's the HMCS Oakville, correct?
Yes.
He is with the Thunder Bay Transportation Museum. Did I get that right? Transportation Museum of Thunder Bay?
Yeah.
At some point, Ken, you'll learn it.
Yeah. And their main exhibit is the Alexander Henry icebreaker on display there. And this is kind of our version of quick history. Connor just gave us a less than 5-minute brief on the HMCS Oakville's attack on the German submarine U-94. So while we do this, each of us has a story to tell. We've got to tell it in 4 minutes and 59 seconds. If we don't make it in that time, we will shut the mic off, and then we have to decide whether or not we want them to keep telling their story. While the story's being told, you guys can ask any questions you want. Throw your questions in the comments. And at the end, we'll vote to see who's got the best story. All right. Who wants to go next? How about I go next?
All right. Roll.
All right. Who's doing the timer?
I can do it. Give me a second.
Okay. Begin now.
In November of 1942, a B-17 bomber was being ferried to England using this northern route that takes it over Greenland and Iceland. Unfortunately, that B-17 bomber crashed in Greenland. Unbelievably, though, all the crew members survived. However, the radio was damaged beyond repair, totally inoperable. Aboard that B-17 was Corporal Lauren Howith. He was a member of the crew from Wasaki, Wisconsin, and he was also being trained as a radio operator. And in Greenland, because their radio wasn't working, he spent nearly a week, frozen fingers and all, to rebuild the broken radio until he could use it to call for help. He was able to send out a signal, and fortunately, it worked. that signal made it to the U.S. Coast Guard cutter, the Northland, which was operating in the waters off the coast of Greenland. They received a radio message containing the location of the downed B-17 crew. And the Northland, another picture of it here, if you look to the right, the Northland carried one of those planes. It was a Grumman Duck, which is a single-engine amphibious biplane. Amphibious meaning it can land in the water, land on land. And also aboard the Northland, in addition to the plane, was a crew that were just crazy enough to fly it in sub-zero temperatures. The crew on the right-hand side, you've got Radio Man First Class Benjamin Bottoms out of Marietta, Georgia, and you've got to the left Pilot Lieutenant John A. Pritchard out of Redfield, South Dakota. They came up with a plan to rescue the crew of the B-17 by flying to the glacier, landing on the glacier, picking up one or two crew members at a time and flying it back to the Northland. However, you got to remember, a Grumman Duck was never designed to do this, never designed to land on ice or land in snow. Regardless, on, let's see, November 28th, 1942 at 10:20 in the morning, they swung the Grumman Duck over the side of the Northland. It took off, and Radio Man Bottoms picked up a weak radio signal from the B-17 bomber. Unfortunately, because the glacier pretty much looked like this, the closest they could get to the B-17 was about 4 miles away, where they could find a spot that was smoother that looked like this. So they landed, they put down, and then Pritchard and Bottoms walked 4 miles to the B-17 in order to start rescuing the crew. After they reached the bomber, they could only bring back 2 at a time, so they picked 2 injured guys that could walk. They got them back from the B-17 to the Grumman Duck. They were able to take off again and return to the Northland, where those 2 first crew members received treatment. On the very next day, November 29th, they did it again. They lowered the plane over the side. Pritchard and Bottoms went back. This time, you remember this guy in the middle? They picked up Corporal Lauren Howarth, the radio man that was able to get the radio working. After walking back 4 miles, they were able to take off yet again. Only this time they flew into whiteout conditions. Bottoms radioed to the Northland, basically asking for weather reports, trying to find clear air, but unfortunately, they didn't get the weather reports, and they were never seen again. This picture here is the last photograph ever taken of that Grumman Duck on that fateful day as it departed the Coast Guard ship to make the rescue. On November 29th, that day, Bottoms, Pritchard, and Howarth were declared missing in action. 1 year later, November 30th, 1943, they were all declared dead.
That is, and you finished with 4 minutes and 25 seconds. How about
Did I make it?
Yeah, you made it.
That's my story. And here's a bonus. So Radio Man Bottoms on the right-hand side, that's him there also. A fast Coast Guard cutter was named after him. That's the Coast Guard cutter Benjamin Bottoms.
Yeah. What happened to the other B-17 crew?
They eventually had to walk out. They kept dropping them supplies for months, so they kept them alive by dropping them food, but no one could get to them until the weather changed, and then they had to walk out.
Wow.
Oh, that is a harrowing story.
Yeah.
They've never found any of the wreckage.
The Army and the Coast Guard, they actually located the wreckage from the air only about a month later. The wings were ripped off, no signs of life, but there's a group that is headed up by one of the members of the expedition that found the Glacier Girl, that P-38 that was brought up from the Greenland Glacier. His name's Lou Sapienza, and he's been trying to find that Grumman Duck. So they keep making expeditions over there. They just haven't been able to locate it.
So they found the wreck a month later, but they weren't able to get anyone hands-on.
Nope.
Huh.
And now the wreck's totally covered up by the glacier.
Wow.
Man, just to think that like 10 years later, they would have used a helicopter.
Yeah.
And just to me, it's like today with stuff like this, you send a heli.
Exactly. But at the time, you didn't have a helicopter on the back of the ship. You had this amphibious plane on the back.
Yeah.
So that's how they operated.
Okay.
Yeah, just like the cruisers, right? Just like a lot of the battleships and Cleveland-class cruisers. This seemed to be like they take off, right? The crane would go into the water, and then they take off from the water. Is that right?
So they'd have to get back somehow, right? So they'd have to land in the water, and then the cruisers or the battleships then would winch them up.
What's it called again? Did you say it's called the Northwind?
Yeah, that's the Northland. Whoops.
Northland.
Northland, yeah. So it's a Grumman duck. So it's a pilot and a radio man. And then they could probably carry another 2 people on board.
How? Were they sitting in each other's laps?
If you look at the side here, you could see where the pilot would be up top and the radio man would be right behind it. But then down below, more into the float area, there was space down there where a couple of people
I see that.
could sit.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, pretty interesting.
How far away was the wreck from the Coast Guard ship Northland? How many miles away do you know?
I understand it was only about a half-hour flight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they were fairly close to the coastline, and it only took them about a half hour to not only grab the signal but then locate the bomber. So it wasn't a long flight at all.
She had a crew of 90 men, 17 of them officers.
The Northland?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of officers for.
For 90.
If you actually look at a picture of her, like her very first picture, she actually has a sail set up too.
Shane, what's the officer complement on the Sullivans during the war?
Anywhere from 18 to 24.
Yeah, Slater was equipped for about 15 officers for a crew of 220-ish, give or take. So 90 enlisted with 15 officers is wow.
Yeah, that's quite a bit.
17 officers.
17.
Maybe they sent all the midshipmen there or whatever from the Coast Guard Academy.
Yeah, it's early in the war. You're fresh out. Where do you want to go? Let's go to Iceland on an old Coast Guard cutter in the early years of World War II. That thing's not sinking a U-boat unless you get it real lucky.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing, Bottoms was from Georgia, and his first assignments were in the Florida Keys. One of his first assignments was at Key West. And he was, learning this new system called radio for aviation. And that's what he'd been doing since the 1930s. And now all of a sudden, then it's like, all right, he's ready for his next assignment. And they send him up north to the Northland.
Robert has a good comment there. You can see.
The Northland carried the duck amidship. Let's see, just in front of their. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, they had a twin 5-inch.
Yeah, they did.
I didn't see the picture, but.
Can you go back to the picture with the plane on the ship?
Well, you'd think there would be one up front on the bow too, but.
She had 2 6-pounder guns.
Oh,
apparently.
God, there it is. Yeah.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, it's right behind the plane. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one on the bow, and then there's one behind the plane. Yeah.
Probably in that beautiful Thayer blue camouflage that they would use in the North Atlantic. White and that Thayer blue color. Very pretty. Is probably what we're seeing there, I would think.
Oh, yeah, the zigzag markings.
Yeah, the camouflage, yeah.
Yeah.
She was apparently the last U.S. Coast Guard cutter with a sailing rig.
Yeah, someone said that. There's a picture of it with the sail. Who said that?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
It's literally the first page of her Wikipedia page. It has her with their sails deployed.
All right, who's next?
I can go.
All right, hold on a second. Let me get
She's scrapped.
to your slides.
What year was she scrapped?
Okay, she was sold for scrap in 1947, but she ended up actually being scrapped in 1962 in Israel. So she lasted a lot longer.
Israel, of all places. Wow.
Yeah, so she lasted a lot longer after the war than people think.
What year was she built?
She was launched in 1927.
Oh, good Lord.
Wow.
Think there's any insulation on that bad boy? Check against the.
All right, John, you have 4 minutes and 59 seconds. When you start talking, I will start the timer.
Okay. There's a good chance I've talked about this story before. The Atherton, rather famous destroyer escort World War II. At the museum, we have the life raft and an officer's hat from U-853, a U-boat she sunk on May 5th of 45. War's over. But what's even more interesting, there's the officer's hat, originally attributed to the captain. Even more interesting is the Atherton was on the coast of the United States traveling north to Boston. She had just finished a convoy from the Mediterranean, a return trip. It started in early to mid-April, I don't recall. right around April 25th, 45, they're about to transit straight to Gibraltar, and a POW ship that they were escorting back to the United States, full of German POWs, radioed to the convoy commodore that they had a German POW who was ill. His appendix had burst.
Mm.
And on board the Atherton was the division's doctor. So they transferred him via breeches buoy between the two ships. His name was Private Franz Kroner. That's the commander of the destroyer escort, Louis Island, helping unpack him. So they brought him below deck to the Atherton sick bay, and they got to work on him. And this is a picture of the operation. Here you have the actual doctor, Lieutenant J.G. Maurice Vitsky. He was actually Jewish. Throw that out there. And what makes this story even crazier, they did the surgery without any general anesthesia. He was awake.
Whoa.
So they injected his spine, so he couldn't feel anything that was going on. But he said as soon as they opened up his stomach, he could smell his stomach. Well, when they opened up his belly, he could smell everything. And, of course, he passes out and blah, blah, blah. And over the next few days, he's right outside sick bay. They're tending to him every 4 hours, giving him penicillin. Commander Island would check on him periodically, making sure he was doing okay. All the while, the convoy is returning to the United States. Yep, there's the commander right there. So they get back to the United States, ships go where they have to go, and then the Atherton has to bring Franz to Boston to offload him. They eventually do. He has 2 more surgeries. He enters a POW camp. On their way to Boston, they get a radio message. A coal ship was just sunk right off Rhode Island by a U-boat. You guys are the closest ships. You need to go deal with it. This is a photo of the Atherton dropping depth charges on U-853. The German POW was below deck, almost exactly below where this photograph is, resting up from an appendectomy. And he's on board, and they're sinking a German U-boat. And that U-boat, of course, is in 100 feet of water, 6 miles off of Point Judith, Rhode Island.
And that is
him.
Okay.
And then to tie it all up, he lives his life, goes back to Germany, finds his family, eventually gets married, has kids. And there he is with his family. This is 2003, 2004, something like that. In 2006, the Atherton crew held a reunion in Albany, and they was talking about stuff. And then someone asked, hey, does anyone know what happened to this German soldier we had on board? They were able to locate him. He was still alive. He was 85. He was unable to attend the reunion. He died 2 years later. And he sent them a video message saying he had always wondered what had happened that day. He's thankful to the doctors and the captain and everything. So this is the English translation of the video that he sent to the reunion group. So I have the video and stuff, but he's talking in German.
Uh-huh.
So that's a rough translation.
So he could speak fairly decent English.
No, he's German. This is a translation.
Oh, it's a translation. It's not a transcript.
Correct. Yeah, the video message he did this in is all German. And then somebody after the fact translated it for the reunion group.
You did it with 6 seconds to spare.
So that's a problem with when I start talking about destroyer escorts and stuff, I go way too long. So I'm very surprised.
Well, I think what I'll say is that Ken and Connor have a quick cadence, right? Like they can talk quickly, and John and myself, we would probably talk a little bit more slowly.
That's a good story.
I like that. Yeah, that's nice.
Hold on a second here. I had a.
So how long was he POW? Do we know that?
He was released in November of 1945.
Wow.
So he wasn't a POW all that long.
No, I don't know when he was initially captured. So who knows? I'm imagining sometime in the spring of 45.
Yeah, so he wasn't a POW in America all that long.
No, May to November 45.
These pictures that you sent, this picture,
I remember that hat.
This picture, and this picture, are these all items in your collection?
Yeah, it's on display.
Really?
The daughters of Commander Island, earlier this year, they donated hundreds of documents and photographs from his service as well.
How does the USS Slater, for example, this picture here, what is this? Tell us. It says lower right hand corner. It says fragment ship U-853. How does the USS Slater Museum come to take possession of this?
There's a photograph of all this stuff after being plucked out of the ocean with Commander Eisen and the Atherton crew posing with it. And then I guess just some people got to take things home with them, and eventually they found their way to the museum decades later.
And
that's how a lot of it happens.
What is this?
Yep. That's one of the life rafts from U-853. It rose to the surface after it sunk.
And somebody obviously stenciled or...
Oh, yeah, this is all... The attack was on May 5th, but it wasn't confirmed sunk until May 6th. Yeah, there was even more stuff of all the items they collected, and we only have a small portion of it, so I don't know whatever happened to other things.
The 853 sunk where?
It's about 6 miles off of Point Judith, Rhode Island. So at this time, Donuts had already sent out the message to all U-boats to go surrender. But for some reason, this U-boat kept fighting. There's basically two options. Either the captain was ignoring the order. I think he was 24 years old or something, or 27. Or their radio antenna had been destroyed because they were depth charged a month earlier off the coast of Maine.
That was a good story. I like that one. There was another picture. This is the hat. Obviously, it's a Nazi. So they were able to get the hat of the captain of the sub.
You can't prove that's the captain. Generally, U-boat captains, their hats are white.
That's right.
Now, this is correct for his rank. However, there would have been others of the same rank on the U-boat as well.
You said a few moments ago most of them are white, but you're saying it's also possible that the commander could have had a dark hat.
It's certainly possible that could have been his hat, but you're never going to be able to prove that. Newspaper articles at the time, a month after the U-boat was sunk, was saying the Atherton retrieved the hat of the captain from the U-boat. Could have been just more to embellish the story to sell papers.
Yeah,
but,
and there was although I don't think it was the 850. I think it was the U-869. There was a submarine that was discovered off the coast of New Jersey, so it's not the same thing. Okay.
Yeah, is that the one in the 90s? A couple guys died trying to go. Shadow Divers. Is that the book?
Yeah, the book is the Shadow Divers. Yeah, that's a good book.
It is very good book.
Yeah, that's by Robert Curson, I think, and Richie Kohler.
They had a History Channel show for a little bit.
Yeah, Deep Sea Detectives.
Yeah, I always loved that as a kid.
If I could get Richie Kohler on here, would you guys want to have him on?
I've never heard of him, so I'll say yes.
Shane, do you know who he is?
No, not offhand, no.
Well, John, you know who he is, right?
If it's the guy I'm thinking of, yeah.
If I could get him on, would you want to have him on and talk to him about how he found the U-869?
Well, that'd be great, because then you could also assign everyone to read Shadow Divers as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey.
Yeah. Shane, you don't have anything to read.
None of us do.
Right. All right, moving on to Shane's story.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to pull up the first picture, and when you start talking is when we start the timer. And again, everyone's had a story, typically an unknown story from World War II to tell, and they have to tell the story in under 5 minutes, 4 minutes and 59 seconds. If they run out of time, we shut their mic off.
All right, this might not be one of those unknown stories, but it's something that's really captured me for the past year and a half, and I want to try and do more research if there's more research. But who are we looking at? We're looking at Admiral John Slew McCain, the grandfather of Senator John McCain. All right, and here he is with his son, John McCain II, and then the younger gentleman is the dad of Senator John McCain. What I'm going to talk about, I was fascinated with the picture of the surrender. That's a good one. Now, I'm going to do a little conjecture, but that's why I want to dig a little bit more into this story. Okay, that's a good one. All right. If you see right there in the corner with the yellow circle, you see that John McCain looks a little dejected. He's actually staring directly at the ground. That one, he is looking forward and just kind of off to the side a little bit. But that one, again, he is looking straight at the ground. And I saw some of these images when I was at the USS Missouri last year, and his demeanor was so different than everyone else's that was standing there watching the surrender of the Japanese. There he is again. He's not even paying attention. Nimitz is signing the Declaration of Surrender. He's off in his own little world where you can see everyone else is pretty much facing forward or looking forward. And there he is. You can see the top of his cover right there in the corner. So the Fast Attack Carrier Force, Task Force 58 or Task Force 38, was dependent on who was in command at the time. If it was Task Force 58, it was Spruance and Mitchell. If it was Task Force 38, it was Halsey and McCain. And a lot of people know about Halsey's Typhoon in December of 44. You know, we've talked about it here. They lost 3 destroyers, plenty of men. They also went through a second typhoon in June of 45. And it was made up of 2 task groups and a service squadron of oilers and transports and auxiliaries. And they had just transferred command from Spruance and Mitchell to Halsey and McCain. And then about a week later, they went through a second typhoon. The first one, they didn't navigate it very well. And the second one, they didn't navigate it very well either. And there was a court of inquiry. Basically, you had Task Force 38.4, which was the main carrier task force. Then you had a center task force 38.1. And then you had Service Squadron 6, and they were all about 18 miles away from each other, from north to south. And while the task force with Halsey, 38.4, they were going north away from the typhoon, and they didn't really get hit. The center task force, 38.1, kind of got smacked. And the admiral in command of that task group signaled to McCain saying he wants to divert and go off in a southeasterly direction. And McCain contacted Halsey. They talked about it for a little bit because Halsey was going to give direction on where the guy should steam, what compass heading they should go. They decided that they would leave it up to this rear admiral of task group 38.1, but it took 20 minutes and they felt that McCain delayed responding. And so the court of inquiry found that if McCain didn't delay that 20 minutes, that task group 38.1 would have come out unscathed.
All right. He ran out of time. Do we let him?
Yeah, I say let's let him finish.
I think we should let him finish because I want to find out what his theory is on why McCain was staring at the deck. What do you guys think?
Sure.
Yeah?
Really? It took you that long, John?
Should I? Okay, I'm going to turn his mic back on. All right, go ahead.
All right, thank you guys. So they have a court of inquiry. They bring Halsey in. They bring all the commanders of the task groups and the task force, and they analyze all of the data, and they actually put it on Halsey and McCain, and they recommended that they each be reassigned, which basically means that they would be taken off of seagoing duty and shipped back to Washington or California or somewhere to work a desk job. Of course, Halsey at the time was very well known, hit him fast, hit him hard, all that stuff. He liked to get his name out there. And he was pretty close with King and Nimitz, but so was McCain. But McCain was just that one notch under him. He was a vice admiral, not an admiral. And about late July, they decided to demote Admiral McCain. And so he says, you know what? I'm out of here. I want to go home. I'm not feeling that well anyway. But Halsey wouldn't let him go. So he was relieved just really towards the end of the war, the last couple of weeks up until the middle of August. And then he was being reassigned as the deputy director of the Veterans Administration. And he also went to Halsey. And as I said, he wants to go home. He's not feeling that well. And Halsey wouldn't let him leave. So my thinking is when this photo is taken, it's only really just about a month after he's demoted. And Halsey is not because of that relationship and that he's well known throughout America. And so either he's not feeling that well, he just got demoted after doing all of this work for the full 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. And so he doesn't really seem as though he feels connected and doesn't really want to be there. A caveat as an aside, he does actually say, thanks, Bill, for letting me stay or making me stay or ordering me to stay, because it's something he did want to see. Due to the strain and stress of the service, and he wasn't that healthy of a guy anyway, when he arrived home on the 5th of September, 3 days later, the next day, he actually drops dead of a heart attack. So after all of that time of being at sea in the Pacific, commanding the Fast Carrier Task Force under Halsey, he goes home to be with his wife and immediately within 20 hours or so passes away from a heart attack. So I find that story very compelling, that the war took a toll on him in that particular way. And I just wondered, how much was it of his demotion after all of that success that he had seen? You know, it's a very moving story for me. So the pictures you're seeing here, he dies 4 days later.
How old was he?
He was 61.
Wow, he looks older than 61.
He does.
Yeah.
In these pictures, he does. You're right, John.
A lot of these guys look older than they actually were.
Yeah.
That was kind of a trend.
You know what I like about this story is that, you know, a lot of us have seen these pictures of the surrender on the Missouri. I have a tendency to focus in the foreground. You know, there's the Japanese signing, and then you've got, that's Nimitz right there. You might just say, oh, okay, there's a whole bunch of officers standing in the back. But to actually then pick out a story, and then you're hyper focused on the guys in the background, and they each have their own story as to why they're standing there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You see the guy that almost looks like he's wearing a mask, like a black mask. It's not, it's just a shadow. And there's a space in between the two officers. Eventually, Halsey goes and walks right into that space. And in other pictures in this series, you'll see him 3 persons down from McCain.
Oh, yeah. That's Halsey right there. Yeah.
You know, and he's like leaning over. So at some point, he moves away from the desk. And I tell you, at the Missouri last year for the HMCS conference, right on the gun turret, I think that you see in this photo, they have about an 8-foot panorama. So it's really large. You can really see everyone's face. I knew what McCain looked like, and I see him looking dejected on the deck where everyone else is paying attention. And I said, what is the story with him? And that kind of took me down that path a little bit. And I would love to learn more of, I don't know where. I'm sure there's a McCain archive somewhere, but
well, that was going to be one of my questions for you. It's like, all right, Shane, who told you about this story? But what you're saying is, when you were in Hawaii for the HMCS conference last year, you just happened to notice this guy that had a sour look on his face.
I knew he was McCain.
You knew that? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I had been interested in his story prior to that. So I said, oh, there's Slew McCain. And then it was one of the ones where he's looking directly on the deck. I said, oh, what's going on with him? Because everyone is their face forward, eyes up, and he's just looking down. So that kind of led me down the path.
Yeah, he's just looking right down at the deck.
It's more of like he's feeling horrible.
Yeah, he did request to go home early too.
He did.
But then go back to that picture that we showed where he's standing next to Halsey. So there, like, that's before or after the ceremony, and he's like smiling and he's barking down to someone. So he has a little smile on his face. So again, it's hard to tell. I would love to dive deeper into his story and the last week of his life, say from August 30th to September 6th, just that 1 week. I'd love to focus on, and if there's diaries or something like that.
Okay.
I don't know why, but
we just heard Shane's story about Admiral McCain. Everyone knows Senator John McCain. And so this is Senator John McCain's grandfather on the Missouri, looking down, either pissed off, not feeling well, maybe a combination of both. That's Shane's story. Or we have John Epps' story about...
Do we actually get a vote?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We have John Epps' story about the German who was operated on, and then that ship later had to attack a German submarine while this guy was on board the Atherton. Or you have Connor's story about the HMCS Oakville trying to sink and then later board and take the submarine. The 2 guys were buck naked. Or then the story of the Grumman Duck aboard the Northland sent to Greenland to rescue a crew of a B-17 bomber. If you guys want to vote and decide which story you like the most, throw it in the comments.
While we wait for them to vote, can I just tell you something quickly? Every time I see that photo of the signing on the Missouri. Now, obviously, Shane, you've been to the Missouri. Did you notice on the signatory plaque that Canada's signatory is in the wrong place?
I did. That's a pretty famous story. He actually like signed on the line underneath.
Yep, he signed where the French would sign.
Yes,
His
and
name.
then they had to correct it all the way down.
So it makes you laugh. You got all these generals and admirals in Canada since a colonel. That's what happened.
Yeah. He's just a colonel. That's what happens. Yeah. And then it messes up all the way down for the other signatories.
I've never heard that. That is funny, though.
Dude,
It's
that was a
typical
good
Canada right there. They always got to screw something up.
Oh,
Hey, you know, Jody, Flying Fortress RC picks my story.
yeah,
Thank you.
CC, she's no help. She just says can't choose just one.
Yeah.
That's all good. I mean, I think they're all really compelling, and I learned something from every story.
I will say that Connor's, that just made me laugh. And there's another part of that story too. So
it's just badass.
What?
It's just badass. They're jumping off of a perfectly good ship onto a sinking submarine to.
Yeah, exactly. But hold on a second. So there's another part to the story. So everybody kind of knows the story of the U-505, where the plan was to try and take a U-boat so that they could grab the Enigma. And the DEs, help me out, John, was it the Pillsbury?
Yeah, Pillsbury was one of the main ones, yeah.
So these guys are ready to go. They've got their crew, their boarding crew ready. The story that I read about the Oakville was that all of a sudden, here they are. They're trying to ram the sub. They can't get it the first time. Then they get it the second time. They kind of scrape over it, though. And then the captain says, all right, guys, we're going to board. And everyone looks around and go, what? And so they start going to the weapons locker, and they can't figure out how to put the gun belts on.
Yeah, it should be noted that the guys selected to do the boarding were the guys who were on the day shift. This is night shift. So they'd been woken up, were at their action stations, and then told, hey, you're going over there. And also just saying as well, yeah, they rammed that U-boat 3 times. The first 2 were glancing bros, and then the third blow, they actually knocked off her sonar when that had happened. The Oakville herself lost power as a result because she was only 20% larger in tonnage than the U-boat. She wasn't that much bigger. And just as an aside, also her skipper was a former Royal Navy captain who had actually commanded Q-boats during the First War. So he definitely was sort of a fighting guy to begin with.
Yeah, it's an interesting story if you get a chance to check it out. I mean, look, like John said, it's a badass thing to just have these guys jump in the water after a gun goes off. What was that? Like a 4?
It was a 4-inch gun.
4-inch gun goes off like right by their heads. None of them can hear. They get knocked in the water. Their boxer shorts are ripped off, and these guys climb onto a German U-boat buck naked. I just couldn't believe what I was reading. So you know what? Maybe Connor's story is the best one. I don't know. They all have their merits, that's for sure. So
maybe we should have kept a theme like that, right? There's the famous destroyer that was throwing potatoes, and I can't.
Yeah, was it Mahan?
I can't remember, but they got a plaque from the Idaho Potato Growers Association.
Oh, really? That's funny.
Because they were side by side with the German U-boat, and they didn't have the guns at the ready, and so they started chucking potatoes. And
it was kidding me.
It was the O'Bannon.
The O'Bannon, of course. Yeah, and the Germans thought they were grenades, so they all like scattered.
It was the Japanese, actually.
Oh, it was the Japanese?
Yeah, okay. Japanese submarine RO-34.
Oh, thank you.
And they started throwing potatoes, and the Japanese thought they were grenades?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
The O'Bannon then got a plaque from the Idaho Potato Growers Association.
Well, that reminds me of the story of the USS Cod, where on the side of their sail, on the side of their conning tower, of course, they have all their kills and all that stuff. But then one of their things is actually a stencil of a cocktail, a martini glass. And Shane, if you know the story, correct me where I screw it up. But apparently they rescued a Dutch crew that had grounded itself. And then they put them ashore in Australia. And then the Cod goes back to sea. And then they come back like a week or 2 later. And the crew has like a 48-hour Liberty Pass. And then they show up in town to start drinking. And there's the crew of this Dutch ship that they rescued. And they start partying together. And
then I think the surrender happens.
Is that what it is?
And they all celebrate together.
Okay.
I think that's the 019.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, good memory. Yeah, so they put a stencil of a martini glass on the side of the conning tower.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love stories like that. Well, and it was the Oakville, they were throwing Coke bottles at the German U-boat.
Yeah. They apparently had a box of empty Coke bottles that they start throwing the bottles at the decks of the U-94.
That's great.
At the DESA final reunion in June, we had a Chatelaine veteran. The Chatelaine was one of the ships that was part of the U-505 capture.
Mm-hmm.
And he said how he was on the depth charges and he fires his depth charge allotment, and now he doesn't have anything to do. But they didn't do any damage to U-505, so he got pissed. So he took the depth charge setting wrench and threw it in the ocean in the direction of U-505 in anger.
Yeah. After I met Shane and Steven in Chicago at the Museum of Science and Industry, we saw the 505 and then we did an episode, and John told that story. I forgot all about it, but that's funny. The guy just threw his depth charge wrench at the submarine. All right. Well, I enjoyed doing this. I don't know if any of the viewers did, but I had a good time with it.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thanks for picking your favorite stories. Here's what I'm going to do. You know, like I always say, we can't do this without the viewers. We definitely appreciate you guys joining us. If you guys have any interest in subjects that you want us to cover, you can always drop me a line at ken@historyxchannel.com. Let us know what subjects you want us to cover, and we'd be happy to entertain it. There it is, ken@historyxchannel.com. So send me an email. Let us know what subjects you want us to cover. I actually am going to see if I can't get that Richie Kohler guy that discovered the U-869 off of New Jersey on here, and for, see if we can't get him to talk about shipwrecks. Yeah, if you like shipwrecks, we had a really cool episode a couple of weeks ago with Victor Vescovo, Park Stevenson from the USS Kidd Veterans Museum, talking about the discovery of the USS Johnston and a little bit about the USS Samuel B. Roberts. We want to have Victor on again in the future to talk about the finding and the exploration of the deepest shipwreck known to man, the USS Samuel B. Roberts. That'll be coming up in a couple of future episodes. Drop us a line. Let us know if there's any subjects that you want us to cover. Let's start with Shane Stevenson. Shane, you said you had a picture that you wanted to share.
Yeah, just one of the major things. This coming weekend is our last weekend that we're open for the year. One of the things that I would love to talk about a little bit, we received that Talos missile from South Bend, Indiana, and we've been cleaning, and then we wet sanded the booster. So we've cleaned the missile. I don't have a picture of that, but she looks beautiful. And then we wet sanded the booster and then primed it. And then I will be going back and painting it an off-white with a spray machine.
Wait, you're gonna paint it?
Yeah, we don't need eight or nine people to do it, right? It's just one gun, and you just slowly go back and forth.
I didn't know you had painting skills. I'm impressed.
I do. Oh, I do. Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm a fabulous painter. So let me see if I could. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Let me see if I can.
That's Connor's dad right there.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay, I see that. Yeah.
Looks good.
Okay,
Wow.
So thank you. Yeah, that's the booster. I want to do a little research into the yellow part, which is where the exhaust comes out. And then towards the front, the blue on the left-hand side is where it would actually couple with the missile. So that's the before. And then as you can see down below, that's the after. And that took about 2.5 hours with, I think it was 9 volunteers. We're at Bidco Marine Group, where they're storing the missiles for the winter, and then in the spring get them on a Little Rock and add them into the missile house, which is really a fabulous story. So the booster itself is about 15 feet long, and then the missile itself is about 21, 22 feet.
Yeah.
So for the past 2 Saturdays, I've been going right to the company and with the excellent volunteer group, and then we've been working on that. So I just wanted to show that. That's a big project that we're working on kind of before we wind down. Thank you, Teresa. Yeah, she says, hey, I took those photos. Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah. Shane Stevenson, curator at the Buffalo and Erie County Naval and Military Park, to check out their YouTube channel where they have additional videos on the Talos missile that they recently acquired from South Bend, Indiana. Search for Buffalo Naval Park on the YouTube search bar, and those videos will come up. You can also check out the Buffalo Naval Park at their website to support them, buffalonavalpark.org. All right, John Epp, curator, USS Slater in Albany, New York. What's up, John?
Yeah, Sunday after Thanksgiving is our final day of the season. We'll open back up the first Wednesday of April. We are starting to finish up our outdoor restoration projects that require painting because it's just getting too cold. On the flying bridge, we've been doing some fix-up around the Mark 52 gun director pedestal. Flying bridge, unfortunately, because it's off the tour route, it gets neglected. It's not in the greatest shape. So we've been doing a little bit of work up there, plugging leaks down into CIC. Other than that, it's just trying to stay warm. May 1st is the Slater's 80th birthday. Looking good for 80 years old. In June, we're planning a huge party up here in Albany at a airport hangar that has World War II aircraft. And it's going to be 1940s themed. Of course, everyone is invited.
And that's in May, right?
No, it'll be in June.
Well, is the commissioning in May?
Yeah, the official commissioning is May 1st.
Okay.
But it's just going to work out easier if we do like the whole party thing in June. Oh, speaking of which, 3 days ago was the anniversary of Frank Slater's death on November 12th of 42.
Remind everybody of who Frank Slater was.
Yeah, so he's the namesake of the Slater. He enlisted in February of 42, was assigned to the San Francisco heavy cruiser. On November 12th, 42, Guadalcanal, they get an advance warning about an hour that there's a Japanese air raid approaching, so they go out to sea. Roughly 24 torpedo bombers show up. San Francisco is targeted by torpedoes. They're able to turn out of the way and avoid any damage. And Frank Slater was a 20-millimeter gunner on the aft gun director platform on the San Francisco. And the plane was essentially now in line with his station. He and his fellow gunners fired at it. And the range of a 20-millimeter is not very far. Mm-hmm. So by the time you can even hit a plane that's coming at you, depending on the speed of that plane, you may only have 5 seconds. But most likely kill the pilot. The plane burst into flame, but it kept going and crashed into a station. 15 were killed, 40 were wounded, I believe. And then, of course, later that night, only hours later, was the night battle of Guadalcanal, where the San Francisco just gets absolutely torn to pieces.
But Frank Slater was killed during the plane attack, right?
Yes, and that battle was like less than 10 minutes long. It was like contact at 2:08 p.m., the plane crashes into a station at 2:16 p.m., and by like 2:20, the battle's over.
Yeah, what I always wonder when I hear this story like that is, out of the 15 crew that are in the tub, so why does Frank Slater get pulled out and have a ship named after him, and the other 14 guys go on to...
Oh, so 11 of the 15 all had destroyer scores named after them.
Oh,
yeah?
Okay. I didn't. Wow.
I think they all received the Navy Cross. And their citations are very similar to the effect of, as a gunner aboard San Francisco, fired at an oncoming Japanese plane, refused to abandon their station, kept firing until the very end.
That would be a good YouTube video for you guys, is to cover all 11 men who had a DE named after them. That would be very interesting.
I see somebody didn't watch our most recent YouTube video.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I put a video up over the weekend talking all about that.
Oh, did you really? Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
I released it at 2:16 p.m. on the 12th.
I am going to look that up then. Thank you.
Yeah, it's 24 minutes long. So
I appreciate it. Oh, awesome.
It can't be said that everyone who was awarded the Navy Cross had a ship named after them.
No. Especially when a new ship was being built, and if it was going to be named after somebody, they'd have a list of guys, and essentially they just pick someone. So there's a College of Pharmacy. They teach medicine and stuff there.
Okay.
1939 graduating class. Paul Stanley Ferment. He graduated in 39, joined the Navy in 41, goes to Guadalcanal, and he's killed. He's the most decorated pharmacist mate in history, I believe, or something, but they had a DE named after him. And the family just donated items belonging to him to the college. If anyone is in Albany, I recommend you go visit the college and look at the exhibit.
John Epp, curator, USS Slater in Albany, New York. Check out their YouTube channel. Search for USS Slater in the search bar of YouTube. It'll come right up. Check out their website, ussslater.org, and be sure to support these guys. Like I always say, If you can't donate, one of the best ways to support them is to simply check out their YouTube channels, give them views, subscribe to their channels. It's one of the simplest yet most effective ways to throw support behind what they do, the content they put out there. So definitely check out the YouTube channels of the Buffalo Naval Park and the USS Slater. Moving on to the Alexander Henry in Thunder Bay.
Unlike you guys, we closed a month ago. It's already below zero at night. We've got snow on the ground. So
this picture's out of date.
Actually, it is out of date because we painted the nose this year, or the bow. We'll be working over the winter to get a lot of our collection digitized. So much of it is yet to be digitized. So we're finally starting that. We also had some recent donations from our local Coast Guard search and rescue station from the Henry's period, stuff they had just sitting around storage. While we are a transportation museum, obviously our main attraction is a Coast Guard ship, so we do have a large section just about them. They do hard work, and it's the same with almost all Coast Guards. They don't get the same credit that the Navies do.
As you're going through the mountain of donated items to the collection, have you come across something where you just have to look at it and say, what the hell is this?
Yeah, what the heck is this? Why was this donated? What's going on? I've asked all those questions over the years. The coolest thing I've discovered recently, and I shared the pictures with you, is I was looking through her old blueprints, which were fantastic to see in person. We have all her blueprints from when she was designed. The big thing I will point out again is the Henry is the newest heritage site in Canada. So the ship now has that status.
Very nice.
Thank you for the support we've had this year. This, in terms of visitation, has probably been our busiest year. Once we do the numbers, we're expecting seeing about 7,000-ish, we think, over the course of the summer, which I know for some of you, that's small potatoes, but for us, that's a very big deal, going in, completing our fourth or fifth season. So it means a lot for us. And we just hope that next year will be absolutely fantastic for us. And we look forward to building relationships with more people as we carry on with preserving both our history here, but also the history of the wider Lakehead area as well.
Connor Kilgore with the Transportation Museum of Thunder Bay and the Canadian Coast Guard Icebreaker Alexander Henry, which is on display there in Thunder Bay, Ontario. To check out their website, check out www.tmtb.ca. We should have an episode where you guys have an item that's either been donated or you've discovered in the collections where you just plain old don't know, a mystery item. I'm talking about, I don't know what this is. We have it. I just don't know what it is. If it's a can opener with a tag attached to it, but the tag is blank and you're just, why is this can opener here? Or some item where you just don't know what it is. I would love to see what you guys have. It's like, we can't throw it away, but we don't know what the hell it is. Or some paint by numbers picture that you guys have in the collections. It's like, we don't know why this is here.
I think I have something for that,
but we can't throw it away. You know,
yeah, sounds good. That's there's some things I can think of right off the bat.
And I'd love to, have you guys show up on camera with your white gloves and everything like that, and you're holding this thing. It's like, we don't know what this is.
Nice.
And Eric H shows up on there, and it's like, yeah, that's worthless. Just throw that away.
No. He said that would be fun.
You know what? We'll do that. The episode that we're doing on New Year's Eve, to commemorate the Cass and Young.
Right.
And then after we get done, by then we'll already have a few drinks. And then Shane pulls up his garbage can. It's like, all right, this is what we got.
Yeah, I think drinks should be allowed that day for the Cass and Young.
Yeah. And then
maybe we should stay out until midnight.
What's the guy that was always on for a while? I forget his name. He paid you a visit and everything. And Shane's going, yeah, we got pulling out of the garbage can, and he's going, hey, I donated that. I forget that. What was that guy's name? I have to be
careful, right? Yeah. Something that I didn't actually get as curator, right? Something that was donated prior to
whatever.
Yeah, that's the truth for most of the stuff for me.
Yeah. I will wrap this up by saying we definitely appreciate everyone watching. Thank you for indulging our quick history stories tonight. And if you guys have any ideas that you want to see us cover, you can always send me an email, ken@historyxchannel.com, and feel free to make a suggestion. My name is Ken Stano with the YouTube channel History X. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a good evening.
Are you wearing
Good night,
a cooker
everybody.
hat? Are you wearing a cooker hat?
I am.